Hello, this is Steve with another video for your B2 C1 exams. Today we are talking about how to take notes effectively to maximize your chances of passing your B2 or C1 exam. I've said this in every video, your teachers say it, you know it, so how do you take notes? I'm going to give you some tips so you can start the right routines. We're going to have in this video all the different parts of the use of English and a bit of reading and a bit of listening, and I'm going to model the perfect behavior that you can then copy to take the right kind of notes. I've made another use of English activity here. The topic is about decoration in your bedroom because I was listening to a podcast and the first episode was about posters, so I made a use of English about this. Pause the video, try and do it. Now I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it like I was the perfect student taking perfect notes. So what we need to do is we need to look at the answers, but I don't have the answers on here, they're only in here because I'm going to write them in the notes to make sure that when you see the answers you are thinking why it's the answer. What did you learn from this question? Because this kind of question may be the exact vocab, but maybe the structure or maybe something similar, the similar kind of thinking will be on the exam. So that's what you need to learn how to do. So if we look at number one, the bedroom is from the stresses of the world. The best answer here is going to be retreat. So we can see in my notes, my C1 notes, we're doing use of English, we're doing part 1. It's the 21st of October at the time of recording. And these notes are from a Focus on Cambridge video. So I'm going to keep all of this in my notes to make sure it's organised. And the first one we've learned, the first expression we've learned is a retreat from something, which means an escape from something, doesn't it? If we saw from the context of the video, let's put my keyboard in Spanish. A retreat from was an escape from the stresses of the world. And we can say, e.g., these videos. Why am I doing an example? Because if I write an example, then I understand, I've internalized how to use this expression. These videos are a retreat from the crazy normal YouTube videos. It's a more relaxing space, isn't it? Many people use these videos as ASMR. So that is the first expression I've learned, a retreat from something. That's what it means. And if I know that, then I know that number one, the answer is retreat. Number two is a bit more simple. It will a positive effect on your mental and physical health. This one is just a collocation, isn't it? What goes with effect from these verbs? It is to have an effect. So what have we learned? To have an effect, positive, negative, similar to have an impact, isn't it? You can also see, we're thinking of other expressions that you see on a C1 exam, have an effect, have an impact. This is the collocation that goes together. And again, feel free to write for yourself a sample sentence. Number three is an expression that always goes together. These words all mean the same thing. They mean something like relaxation, but the expression is rest and relaxation. So we could say rest and relaxation, which is a set expression or a fixed expression, whatever we want to call it, but it's an expression that goes together, rest and relaxation. And we can do the same for all of these in part 1, and you can do this every time you do a use of English activity, and you will soon learn a lot of useful activity. Number 4 is the same. What goes with colour? Well, the expression that we use is colour scheme. The colour scheme referring to the collection of colours that go together. My nice yellow colour scheme in my living room, which you can really see with the light today. Number 5 is a really common C1 question. Distractions in your bedroom will cause your eyes to, does this happen during class? Your eyes start looking for your friends and start looking out the window. What are your eyes doing? They are wandering. So you could say your eyes are wandering. Maybe we need the meaning here, because the expression is your eyes wander, but what does it mean? It means your eyes move away from where they should be, move away from the point of concentration. So you get the meaning there. We don't need the whole thing in bold. Let's keep our organization and our formatting and presentation nice and clear, and keep our keyword in bold. Number 6, Quite an easy one. Plays a vital in bedroom decor. You play a something plays a role, doesn't it? To play a role. This is an expression. What was the actual question? It was role. And to play a role, we know this means to be a part of. It plays a role, it is a part of it. Number 7, your screen brightness will you from sleeping. Well, what goes with from? Prevent, of course, a very common C1 expression. To prevent someone from doing something. But notice how I'm writing it down. Prevent you from sleeping. I want to understand the whole expression because this is on part 1. It's also on part 2, part 4. In part 2, you might need to add in from. In part 4, you might need to say, I couldn't do it because this happened. This prevented me from doing this. So you really need to understand prevent, then with a person, then with a preposition, then with an ing. And obviously in the part 1, we've got it from, to prevent from. And we know what it means, don't we? It's Latin, it's common to stop someone from doing something. And finally, number 8, this one's a little bit more difficult, I think. It's a bit more of a linking word, which you sometimes get on part 1. Distraction can make falling asleep difficult, as loud noises can keep you from staying asleep. And all of these sort of possible words, a little bit grammatical words, such as, you hear a lot. But the answer is just, because just as means the same as. If we think about that sentence, then we can say distractions stop you, the same as loud noises stop you. So just as means the same as, and that is our expression we've learned. And again, we could write a sample sentence for all of these. We could, really important, come back the next week and try and think about what do these mean again? Or even the next week, can I use this in a sentence? That would be a great activity for you to really internalize all your C1 expressions. But we'll leave part 1 there and we'll go on to part 2, which we need to put in font size 18. And of course, I'm leaving a little space here because tomorrow, next week, I will add to my part 1 and I'll be doing different part 1 activities from random websites, from books, from wherever I can find them. But let's move on to part 2. Part 2 is about the thorny devil, because episode 2 of the podcast, 3 Bean Salad, very fun podcast, was about lizards. So we have a text on the thorny devil. Feel free to try and do it yourself. It's a completely original Cambridge C1 text that should never have appeared before. And then I'm going to go through the answers in the same way. Number 1. This is a lizard that is native Australia. Well, what you're learning in number 1 is that an animal or a species or something is native to a place, So the answer is 2. This lizard is native to Australia. Slightly unusual. I mean, I guess it could say something else, but we say native to. Now we're formatting it as a list, which I got to admit I don't really like, because in the first one we weren't formatting it as a list. So let's get rid of that. And again, you can give an example. Maybe I'll just do an example for the first one of each one. And I have to do it, don't I? I have to say, since I live in Spain, the links, I say the Iberian links, I guess, to give it the full name. The Iberian links, which we should spell correctly, is, you guessed it, native to Iberia, Spain and Portugal. Also in Portugal, don't forget it's also in Portugal. Number 2, the name given to this lizard the names reflect appearance. Well, the answer here is its, isn't it? Its appearance. What have we learned here? We have learned that referring to an animal or a thing, then the possessive pronoun is its. Have we actually learned something there? If you understand that, you have. It can be difficult to understand these things, but why don't we say his? Because these are male and female and we don't know what they are. Its. Number 3, where do they get their name from? Because they are depicted, a hideous beast. They are depicted as something. Depicted as something. This is sort of similar to described as, defined as, regarded as. Lots of expressions that all go with as. So depicted is one of them, meaning it is represented, shown as. What happened there? Number four is a really good one, but I don't know what I'm going to do with the notes here. Describing their life. They live in burrows, they don't travel, they're not territorial, so their home ranges can overlap with individuals. The best answer here is other. Really, this is from the context. So what do we say about this? I don't really know. For your notes, honestly, sometimes you just got to say context. I mean, I guess the grammatical point is that it's plural, isn't it? Individuals is other, because singular would be an other, and we know that. But maybe the only thing we could talk about is plural singular, because plural would be other, singular would be another. Number 5, defend themselves from predators. They use their hard, sharp spines. Number 5 is an easy expression, isn't it? We all know this expression. In order to, which means to. Other pointless English expressions which use too many words to say to. So as to is the other one you see on the exam sometimes. They use their hard, sharp spines that dissuade attacks from predators, making them difficult to swallow. Well, how do they do it? By making them difficult to swallow. By making them difficult. So by is a preposition that describes how we do something, isn't it? How we do it equals by, and then with ing. By doing this, you can do this. So we understand the structure, and again, you can make your own sentence. By studying every day, you can pass the exam. They roll up into a ball. This is maybe the most difficult one, but it's a really common C1 Part 2 trick. What are they rolling up into a ball? In one word. Themselves. They roll themselves up. So here we need the reflexive trick. This is a reflexive pronoun, isn't it? They, themselves, me, myself, you, yourself. But you need to think about who the action is taking place towards, if you see what I mean. It's taking place towards themselves, so the answer is themselves. Look out for that trick on C1 Part 2, it's very common. And finally, this usually confuses predators and they attack the fake one of the real head of the lizard. So they attack the fake head, which is like this bit, not the real head. They attack this one instead of the real one. Instead of equals in place of. Other B2C1 expression you see a lot, that is a synonym. How does Microsoft Word know it? I hope you knew it as well. Rather than is the other expression that means the same thing. And that's part 2, Thorny Devils. And we continue with our nice, beautiful notes that we are building up in detail, clearly showing what we are learning. Part 3. Part 3 of the podcast was about Rome. So we got some interesting sayings about Rome with 8 questions where you need to transform the words. This one's quite easy for your notes because what are you learning? You are learning the typical transformation. To push your notes to the next level, what we can do is think about other transformations using this word. So here, the English language is do the activity yourself, and then we'll explain the answers. Here, the answer is references, isn't it? Because it's packed with what? We know, refer. And then I do my little arrow that always looks nice. Can become references for this answer. But we could also maybe talk about a referral with a double R. When you refer someone or something to someone else, you make a referral. This is like a referral. We could maybe talk about a referee in terms of a sporting occasion, football, or a university referee, someone who gives you a reference for university. Here the answer is references because it's plural as well, because we've got no article, so it's packed with lots of references. So refer, references. Again, let's make it clear what was on the actual exam, but let's think about other possible answers as well. For the of word lovers, well, amuse, this one's fairly easy, isn't it? What is the noun of amuse? It is, of course, amusement. This is the noun. I mean, this is the other useful thing we can do in part 3. We can think about the word type that we need. For the something, it's going to be the amusement. And then we have some interesting expressions about Rome, which probably exist in many languages, but in English they are like this. When in Rome, do as the Romans. One of the most popular idioms for and even more so when someone visits Rome. So context, we are talking about people visiting Rome. We're talking about people. People who travel are travellers. And again, we need the S because it doesn't say a, so it must be in plural. Common trick on this part of the exam, isn't it? But it must be plural. And I think this is in UK English, so it's going to tell me a double L. In American English, you can have one L. But really common trick on part 3 of the exam is refer to the people, like visit, visitor, with an O. This kind of word, you are supposed to form these kind of words. There is a special word for them, which I never remember. Let's call them people nouns, the noun of the people who do the thing. So, travellers. The expression from St. Ambrose's advice to St. Augustine. So, what is the expression? What is the origin? Where did it come from? Well, what did it do? We need a verb. The verb of origin is originate. And here we could actually use the present or we could use the past, because obviously it originated in the past, but the expression still exists, so we can say it originates from this story. It's not very clear from the context if we need past or present, so both are okay. Other examples of origin, there's an obvious one, is there you get originally quite a lot. Origin, original, originally. These are fairly common part 3 examples. Number 5. They were not fasting. Why were you not fasting? Well, the explanation. Explain. Slightly irregular, isn't it? Because we lose the I and we say explanation. That's why it's on the exam, because it's irregular. Are there any other words that would come from explain? I'm not sure about that, not off the top of my head. Maybe I'll think of some later, but not right now. And another expression, all roads lead to Rome. This is a proverb. What kind of proverb is it with spread? That one's a little bit more difficult, but I did want to include this because I have seen similar ones on the C2 exam, C1 exam. Widespread. When I say similar ones, I'm thinking especially things like worldwide. You see quite a lot on there. Widely, if we talk about something being widely known, well known, these kind of expressions can come up quite a lot. But spread, widespread fits there. I'm not doing my bold, am I? That's not very elegant. Let's keep it elegant. I prefer originated. Number 7, it was so vast and efficient that you could say any road would lead to Rome. Well, you could truly say that, which, be careful with your spelling. This is again why it's on the exam, because it's irregular. We don't have an E. I wrote it as a trick. Right? I didn't spell it badly and get corrected by Microsoft Word, but we know true becomes truly, which is why it's on the exam, because it's one of these little irregular words. Other possibilities that you might see on the exam with true would be truthful or even truthfully, and you could actually say truthfully for this question because you are saying it truthfully, full of truth. And the last one, a bit more irregular, solution or outcome. An outcome, a result. So we've got come, becoming. This is another one. This is strange, isn't it? Becoming outcome. but you can also think of other common verbs that use come, overcome, become, and so on. But for this one, how come. Okay, let's stop there and we'll continue later. Okay, welcome back after a brief break, looking after the baby. Let's move on to part 4. Now for part 4, I've written some typical sentences that you'll find using the structures specific to this video. Part 4, you're learning a bit of everything. So when you're taking notes, let's move on to part 4. You need to be thinking, same as before, what am I learning? And then writing down these structures that you are learning. So let's start with number 1. Always a good place to start. And as before, pause the video, try and answer them. How do you answer them? What structures do you need to know, and so on? Here's what you need to know. This time I have written the answers because it's a bit complicated just to say them. But in number 1, if you will always do it, then you have promised to always do something, or you've promised that you would always do something. So the first grammar point, because there's always 2 points in these questions, isn't there, for the 2 marks? The first one is what we'd call reporting verbs. And what have you learned? You've learned that you promise to do something, or we can also say promise plus infinitive. Or the other option would be, when we're talking about reported speech, we're talking about will to would in reported speech. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. I will call you. He said he would call me. This is reported speech, isn't it, when we talk about reporting speech and reporting verbs in terms of promise. That's one point. If you know how to use from direct speech to reported speech, I'll always do it. You promise to do it. You promise that you would always do it. Second point, I'm going to write down the vocab. I'm going to a note. It's an expression. You have to know the expression. So I think we're going to have to put, how do we do this? Like 1b. Is that an elegant way of doing it? Let's say we can do it like that. 1b, to make a note of something, equals to write it down, especially to remember it. If you say, I'll make a note of it, it's like, because I want to remember it. So that's the other expression you've learned. The dividing line means 1 mark if you got this, 1 mark if you got this, 2 marks if you got both, 0 marks if you made a mistake in both. Number 2, I've decided to do it. What I'm going to do is organize my notes. So 1 mark here is just sort of for the structure of knowing if I've decided to do it, then I'm going. And the second point is that here we're going to use the infinitive. What I'm going to do is, and we use the infinitive with this structure, what I'm going to do is, like that. What can we write down in our notes here? I guess the other point we're learning here is the relative pronoun what, meaning the thing that I'm going to do, which I always like to make a note of because it's a super common one in all parts of the exam. So what I'm going to do, the thing I'm going to do is, I've decided to do it, the thing that I'm going to do is like that. And I guess we could write down I have decided equals I am going to, but really we know that if we're at C1, don't we? But just so we're making sure that we've, thinking of the common structures that you'll find on the exam again and again. Number 3, I don't want to, check the answers with rather. Well, if you don't want to, then you would rather not do something. So rather not is 1 mark. And check the answers with up, look up. Or as many of the young kids say nowadays, search up, which still sounds a bit strange to me, but that's what you can have on the exam. So what have we learned? Don't want to equals would rather not do something. And again, we're making a careful note that this is with the infinitive without to. This is why it's rather not look, not rather not to or something else. Rather not looking, no, infinitive without to. Like many modal verbs, like should and all these things, could, it's the infinitive without to. And there was a part 2 there, wasn't there? Part A, part B of question 3, the phrasal verb you've learned. A common one, you probably already know it, so you maybe don't need to write it down. But to look up, as in look up information, means to search or check information. Number 4 is a conditional. We need to know how to do conditionals. if I had taken better notes, or had I taken better notes, I would not have failed, or I would have passed. So third conditional, if I'm making notes, I'm just maybe, if I'm practicing a lot, I can just put third conditional, and then I can just think, okay, I know the third conditional. I can make my own sentence. If I had, or had I, the same thing in this question, if I had, I'm not copying it, am I? No, I'm changing it, so I'm manipulating it because I know how to use it. If I had studied more, I would have got a better understanding. That's not very good, Microsoft. I would have got a better grade. And we can see would have got, had studied, this is third conditional. I didn't study, I didn't get a good grade. And fail and pass, vocab, but I think you know this vocab. Number 5, you're only watching my great videos, then you are with on, the verb you want is you are insisting on doing it. So what have we learned here? I think we can put this one all together, but you insist on, and then obviously because it's a preposition, it must be with ing, insist on doing something. And again, you can make your own sentence. I insist on paying for the meal. The typical fight you have at the end of the meal, I insist on paying for the meal. Go on then, you pay for it. People say it's vital to study grammar, and the last question is a passive question. People say, it is said that, and then here we're going to use the gerund, aren't we? Because it's like its own little phrase, a verb phrase, or really it's a noun phrase, I guess, but don't quote me on that. But it's like the subject of this little clause, isn't it? Studying grammar is vital. So because it's like the subject of this little clause is going to be ing, because when a verb is used as a subject or an object, it is ing. So what have we learned? Passive. Oh, I shouldn't say that first. Passive is the explanation, but what we've actually learned is people say ... means it is said that. Or we can do the same for people think that, it is thought that, people believe that, it is believed that. And then the other point was maybe gerund, subject as gerund, but this is a very obvious point, really. This is why we say, I like swimming, because it's an object. Swimming is fun, because it's a subject. Okay, that's the end of part 4. Hopefully you got some useful notes from that, and we can see my beautiful, elegant notes that I would add to after each session. And I will do the same thing for reading and listening. Could be a separate document, of course. You're the boss of your documents. That wasn't a very good Chef John rhyme from Food Wishes, but for reading, I've got a quick reading text on submarines, which is the next topic in the podcast. So feel free to pause it, read it, find the answer. It's a bit of an easy one, but you have to imagine it's part of a long text. All the options are possible, but when you're reading it, what are the clues that are telling you the answer? What's maybe some vocab you didn't know? Spin around, is that a phrasal verb that we know? Bang your head, is that a verb for maybe part 1? If they give you 4 options and one is to bang your head, that's going to be the correct answer. Get used to something, a good phrase for part 2. On board, meaning on board the ship with the correct preposition. Bunk, vocab. So all these kind of things are things we could be writing down that are sort of C1 level words. You probably know a lot of them, but I always like to say, okay, you know them, but when you read them, you know them. But if it came up in the exam with no options, what is to spin around? To, if we're being like scientific, to rotate. To bang, to hit. I know these things, of course. You can be searching for them on Google. Google image search always helps with these kind of things, doesn't it? To give you a good visual image. To get used to something, on board, and so on. And the correct answer, of course, is cramped, because the whole point of this text is that there's not a lot of space, which means cramped. It's highlighted because it's good vocab, not because it's the answer, although it is, by coincidence, the answer. And you need to know that to get the answer. If you don't know what cramped means, it's going to be difficult to get the right answer. The distractions are maybe possible. Get used to, adjust to. Ooh. No space, crew members, close relationships. No. Lacking resources. No, there are enough bunks, but it's just this thing. This is the thing they say. So the point there, vocab, expressions from reading with a C1 mindset in your notes to check the next day. And again, can you write your own sentence with it? You spin me right round, baby, round, round. A nice little expression of this, no? And the same for listening, which we will listen to very quickly. You need to put yourself in the position here because it's a bit weird just listening to one clip, but this is from a part. What part will this be? This must be part 3, no? Because it's like an interview, multiple choice. A psychologist talks about perceptions of childhood. So listen and then think what is the correct answer and think what are we learning from this?
Well, according to a recent newspaper report, childhood is dying. So those cheeky little scamps I saw challenging each other to throw their school bags on top of a bus stop must have been a figment of my imagination. Or perhaps they were making a political stand against the rigidities of the formal curriculum. Who knows? Apparently a group of adults do. Academics and professionals have put their signatures to a letter, subsequently championed by the Daily Telegraph newspaper and the Tory party, articulating the fall of childhood innocence. My heart is with the sentiments of this campaign, but I worry that it loses sight of practical wisdom.
Okay, listen again if you want. Go back 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Why does she mention children throwing their school bags on top of the bus stop? What is her attitude? Try and answer it. Try and listen again. Well, let's go through. What should we do first? Let's go the vocab first.
Well,
look. In terms of vocab, new vocab, cheeky scamps. Cheeky, meaning somebody who's a bit naughty, not in a bad way normally, like childish naughty. Scamp is a word for a naughty child. A figment of my imagination, a very nice expression. To make a stand, this is a really good part 1 expression. To be championed by someone, maybe championship, championing as a verb for part 3. Really useful little vocab that we would note down, which is going to help us find the answer again. Cheeky, I don't know a quick definition of cheeky, like naughty and infantile, childish, in a sort of immature way. A scamp, we can fit with this, we can say a cheeky scamp because it's the same idea, it's just a noun for a person like this. A figment of my, did you catch my mistake? Let's try and keep this organised, shall we? We are doing listening now. A figment of one's imagination means a product of your imagination, doesn't it? I guess you can get that from the context, but the word is figment, meaning you imagined something. And as we said, make a stand is also a nice one. To make a stand means to stand up for something, to stand up for your principles, to fight for your principles. So knowing all of this, we would say her attitude is, D is the best answer. She's sarcastic. She's saying childhood is dying. Well then, how come I saw children being infantile, cheeky, silly? Must have imagined it. She's being sarcastic because she didn't imagine it. She's saying, no, this story proves that childhood is not dying. And then she goes on and talks a load of rubbish about other things about childhood. But what have we learned from it? This is why we need to learn these words, because that's what gave us the answer. So think about the words that gave you the answer. These are the words you should be learning. Right, that's about it. We've done use of English in a lot of detail, some reading and listening. I'm not going to talk about writing and speaking because the input you get from reading, listening, use of English, ideally you would be using this as your output in writing and speaking. These are the kind of expressions that Cambridge have decided are C1 level expressions. So if you can use them in your writing and speaking, it's very, very impressive. That's what they want to see. So to sum everything up then on my points about taking notes, which is so important, in a nutshell, in summary, try to own the language that you are using. So don't just be a passive consumer of the exam and say, 5 out of 8, not bad. 3 out of 8, not so good. But at least I practiced. No, get everything from that exam and say, I understand this exam. I've read it and now it's mine. I know what I'm doing with this. And by taking notes like this and controlling it, organising it nicely, you are the owner of this exam. As I said, organisation is going to be a big part of this. You can see my beautiful notes that I would save and add to and make a nice big document. Or if you prefer doing it by hand, I think that is almost even better. But since I'm making a video, we're doing it on this computer. and then revising it. Go back to it. Don't just forget it. Go back a week later, a month later. We know how the brain works, how language learning works. When you're old, you're not just going to see a word once and remember it. You need to see it 3 or 4 times, spaced apart, before it sticks. And it does work. It's scientifically proven, so it will work. Okay, please continue working hard, take lots of good notes, and this will help you pass the exam. Keep watching for more videos.